What time is it? Do we have time? Yeah, we have time. Good. John Mubarak is going to be on the show at 9 o'clock. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't think I've ever had him on my show, ever, in the history, ever. So it would be great to have a conversation with him and to have a conversation with him. Before I get to that, Zelenskyy had a horrible day on Friday. Now, I didn't get the opportunity to talk about this because this happened after the show, so I'm going to talk about it now. Zelenskyy had a horrible day, maybe one of the worst days in his life. It's fascinating in the way that this actually broke down. I initially, when this first came up about the whole tomahawk thing, said to myself, and I think I even said it aloud on the show, I said, Trump is bluffing. This is nonsense. You don't have the ability to launch him. And if anything, you're trying to look for leverage. This was a search for leverage. And then the closer that we got to the meeting with Zelenskyy, I was like, okay, maybe this guy is going to give him, especially if the Russian response is muted. Meaning, if the Russian response is effectively, this is going to change our relationship, and that's it, then what the U.S. may come to an assessment of is, okay, well, they're going to be angry, but they're going to be pragmatic. They may beat the hell out of Ukraine some more. But ultimately, if it ever came up for a deal, they would still be open to a deal. So what is the downside to giving these missiles to Ukraine? Meaning you could come to that assessment. And if you do come to the assessment in those terms of, well, Putin has always been pragmatic. We are literally attacking Russian oil. It is clear the United States is helping Ukraine to do that. And these guys are still saying that they're on the Alaska game plan. So maybe there's not going to be a hyperbolic response. And if there is not a hyperbolic response, then what's the downside? And so I started to come to the assessment of, okay, well, maybe Trump is going to give these missiles. Trump, out the blue, after talking to Putin, because he had a conversation with Putin out of the blue, comes out just before Zelenskyy comes, by the way. Meaning this is taking place just before Zelenskyy comes to the States. So if you're Zelenskyy, it is very possible, up until this moment, you thought, I'm getting tomahawks, baby. I'm getting tomahawks. Whether I can launch them or not, secondary to the point, I'm getting tomahawks. It's going to alienate the Russians, but it shows that the U.S. is still invested. And whether I can launch them or not, at some point, it's a down payment on the United States effectively continuing to help us out. I'm getting tomahawks. This is going to be a fantastic visit. My name is Zelenskyy. Let's go to D.C. That may be your thoughts. And then Trump comes out before you get there and says this.
But we need them. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, didn't say much, but I do say to you, we need tomahawks for the United States of America, too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good, but we need them too. We talked about.
So imagine, your name is Vladimir Zelenskyy. You just finished snorting 20 lines of coke, and you see that on Twitter. And I'm going to DC. And for the last week or so, I had a good faith belief that I may actually be getting tomahawks. So you get the situation where Zelenskyy comes, he sits down with Donald Trump, and the meeting is an utter and complete train wreck. Now, the meeting was not held in public. There were parts of it where they were together talking and everything else, but the meeting itself was held behind the scenes. Zelenskyy leaks the meeting to the Europeans because he immediately called the Europeans for comfort after the conversation apparently with Trump, where he didn't get what he wanted and his hopes were effectively dashed. When Zelenskyy came out to even give his speech after the meeting, he didn't even stand in front of the White House. He went out into the field like Lafayette somewhere in order to give this conversation to the press. Couldn't even stand in front of the White House. This is one of the scenes from that meeting, and I want to show you something in this scene. Zelenskyy, at some point, brought up, well, hey, if you give us the tomahawks, we'll give you drone technology. Now, this is laughable. The U.S. has $1 trillion military budget. You are bankrupt as a country and you're losing territory left and right. You're losing in manpower and you're losing on the ground. Not to mention you're losing in air war. Why on earth would the United States need drones from you when we are giving you money and equipment hand over fist? Not to mention the Europeans. Take a look at this.
Would authorize some kind of an exchange where
Yes, of course.
the US
Yes, we have proposition.
They're laughing. He says, yes, we have a proposition. And Trump looks at Vance and starts laughing. They go into a meeting. When they go into the meeting and they have the conversation, the meeting turns out to be a complete and utter train wreck. This is the way Financial Times reported took place. Trump urged Zelenskyy to accept Putin's term or be destroyed by Russia. Be destroyed. Now, again, what you need to think of is before this conversation, Donald Trump had a conversation with Putin on the phone that lasted 2.5 hours. And as I pointed out, what Putin probably got across to him is, if you do that, our response will be X and Y. Just know it. So when Trump comes out, what does Trump do? Look, we're not going to give the tomahawks. And again, there may be two things that work. Either it was always a bluff, or two, it was a trial balloon where Donald Trump gets, I guess, the fear of God put in him by Putin in regards to Putin's response to what Trump told him about the tomahawks. Whichever one it is, it boils down to the same thing. Currently, at this moment, it may be revisited at another time, Trump apparently backed out of giving the tomahawks. And apparently there was a screaming match in the office with Zelenskyy, where Trump strongly got across to him, look, both sides need security guarantees, which apparently baffled Zelenskyy. Two, you need to accept the Russian deal or else you will be destroyed. After Zelenskyy pushed back, Donald Trump said something about, okay, well, we'll freeze the lines. What about freezing the lines? Freezing the lines of contact. Even this is not going to be acceptable. Now, the other part to this is right here. This is Financial Times. This is what Financial Times is reporting took place in the meeting based on quote unquote sources. Donald Trump urged Vladimir Zelenskyy to accept Russia's terms for ending its war in a volatile White House meeting on Friday, warning Vladimir Putin had said he would, quote, destroy, unquote, Ukraine if it did not agree. The meeting between the United States and Ukrainian president descended many times into a shouting match, with Trump, quote, cursing all the time, unquote, people familiar with the matter said. They added that the U.S. president tossed aside most of the front line in Ukraine, insisted Zelenskyy surrender the entire Donbass region to Putin, and reportedly echoed talking points from the Russian leader had made in the call a day earlier. Now, the issue with this is that whether you pull your troops out of Donbass or whether Russia takes it within a year or a year and a half or 6 months, Russia's going to take it. Period. Full stop. Regardless of Trump putting out in a tweet that Ukraine is winning, and he believes that if Europe keeps giving them money that Ukraine can take, obviously Trump doesn't believe that. Trump apparently tossed aside the maps that Zelenskyy had on the table, and because at that point I would imagine Trump knew they were nonsense, and effectively browbeat Zelenskyy. Trump came out of the meeting, and they asked Trump, hey, did you tell Zelenskyy to give up all of Donbass? This is Trump's response.
During that meeting, did you tell him he needed to cede all of the Donbass region to Russia?
No, we never discussed it. We think that what they should do is just stop at the lines where they are, the battle lines. You have a battle line right now. The rest is very tough to negotiate. If you're going to say, you take this, we take that, there's so many different permutations. So what I say is they should stop right now at the battle lines. Go home, stop killing people, and be done.
What do you think should happen with the Donbass region?
Let it be cut the way it is. It's cut up right now. I think 78% of the land is already taken by Russia. You leave it the way it is right now. They can negotiate something later on down the line.
Right.
Now, it was also pointed out that Witkoff went to Russia, gave a deal, basically the idea of a deal. Putin responded, and Trump never gave a response back to Putin's response. So there was something that was floating out there in the ether that the United States never ultimately responded to. And Trump, in a lust for some kind of leverage, goes on a campaign of effectively attacking Russian energy and Russian oil. All right. Donald Trump has a conversation with Putin. Donald Trump backtracks on the issue of the Tomahawk missiles. And after backtracking, effectively saying, I'm going to Budapest and I'm going to have a conversation with Putin after our familiars and the underlings work it out. All right. Something interesting, though, in the Financial Times piece. Accept the deal or be destroyed. Accept the deal or be destroyed. Now, Donald Trump is not saying that he said that, but what if he did? What if he did? Dr. O, a really good Russian analyst, one of the best, I would argue. Whether I agree with his take or not, he's very good. He's very thoughtful in the way that he gives his points of view. He came out and said, which on some level makes you think that Donald Trump may have told Zelenskyy that because of what Putin might have told Donald Trump. This is Dr. O. Listen to what Dr. O says about what his sources are telling him, or at the very least what he believes took place in that meeting based upon, let's say, some of the conversations taking place in Russian media.
The Russians have made serious threats, counter threats to the United States over the possible introduction of tomahawks into Ukraine. I'll be very specific. On Russian state television 3 days ago, a host to a talk show who is actually very close to Putin, and it may be considered to be talking on behalf of Putin and saying things unofficially, which the Kremlin cannot say officially. And what he was saying is that if the tomahawks are introduced, we will go to all-out war. We will declare war on Ukraine, and we will destroy the entire government. We will bomb them during the daytime so that all staff go down with the buildings, and we will then level Ukraine. That's pretty strong. Nothing like that has been said by Russia, and we may be certain that similar remarks were made in back channels to the.
So Dr. O is arguing, look, what he pointed out to Trump, either directly and through back channels, is the special military operation will cease to be a special military operation and it turn into an actual war, meaning we will declare war. That's Dr. O's argument. Dr. O has been the one who said Putin has been weak, and people around Putin has been looking at the fact that Putin has been too weak in regards to the way he's been dealing with Trump and these quote unquote negotiations where Donald Trump is pretending to be a negotiator while also being the guy who's actually running the war. And Dr. O's comment kind of balances with the Financial Times piece. I mean, after all, what do you say to Trump in that call, that 2.5 hour conversation? Putin is very diplomatic. He's very easy to talk to in regards to the way he deals with diplomatic language. Obviously, part of it was probably talking about business interests. But you would imagine that part of it also had to be, if you do that, we will do this. And there may have been back channel communications explaining this will be the consequences of you doing that. So your belief that we would escalate on Ukraine is absolutely right. We would escalate to the point of war. Is Dr. O right? I have no idea. I always tell you, never mistake coherent for the true. And I mean it. Of all of my guests, never mistaken a person being coherent for a person being true. Oftentimes when I'm bringing guests on, I want to hear different points of view so I can make my own assessment about which point of view I think is more accurate. And I can pull and take from the various points of view. I don't have to agree with my guests. Dr. O's case here may actually be right. Now, Donald Trump could have thrown the tomahawk stuff out entirely for the point of a bluff. Do you put it past him? Think back when Donald Trump put out the bluff in regards to bone-crushing sanctions. We're going to have bone-crushing sanctions. Putin's spine is going to be crushed by these sanctions. And then let's have an Alaska summit as a dodge for the sanctions, because what he fully understood was the sanctions was going to have negative consequences on the U.S. economy. Is this something similar? The peace process has stalled. Hey, man, I may give tomahawks. Who knows? He brings Zelenskyy here for the circus and for the show, not caring one iota about how this makes Zelenskyy look, or the fact that Zelenskyy was dragged all the way to Washington to be told no. He has a conversation with Putin before he has that meeting with Zelenskyy, and tomahawks, which may have always been a bluff, leaves the table for the time being. And at this point, he's like, all right, well, we're now going to have another negotiation. Was it always a bluff? Or was it a situation where the conversation with Putin adversely affected what Trump wanted to do and given those tomahawks? Now, obviously, there was going to be difficulty with launching those tomahawks, even though they did have a launch vehicle. Who knows how many of those vehicles they could have gotten to Ukraine? Who knows how many of those missiles they could have supplied to Ukraine? Who knows how fast they could have gotten those missiles to Ukraine? So all of this stuff is nebulous, right? What we do know, though, is that whatever was said in that conversation, Trump backed down. Is doctoral right. Now, doctoral has argued that for all intents and purposes, Russia was considering declaring war the moment that those tomahawks were either delivered or those tomahawks were announced, that would have been the red line and the final straw. It's fascinating. One last point, Dmitry Medvedev. He says something that I really want to highlight. So Medvedev, when all of this clown show took place, put out a Telegram post. And the Telegram post was in Russian, so I had to translate it. But he says this: during a meeting with the tearful beggar, Trump said an obvious but quite curious thing: let Russia and Ukraine both declare themselves winner in the conflict. What he's referring to is a tweet that Donald Trump put out effectively. Hey, both sides can just declare that they win. Everybody can go home. All right. Medvedev continues. Yes, that often happens after military clashes, but this is not our case. And it is not just that we need a victory with conditions known to all. That is an axiom. The point is also that the current bandit gang will not be recognized as winners at home under any circumstances. And the drug addict scoundrel and his comrades understands this perfectly. The loss of territories will not be forgiven, not only by the rabid Ukrainian nationalists, but also by political competitors. Therefore, the end of the war means the death of the regime. So Trump's thesis does not work here. Basically, no. This idea that everybody goes home and declares themselves a winner, nonsense. They will lose, and not just lose. They will know that they lost. There's a difference in those things. No spinning it, no stabbing the back method, no none of that stuff. You will lose, and you will lose emphatically, and you would know it when you go to bed in the morning and when you wake up at night, 3 a.m. between you and your God. As Banderite as you are, you will know that you utterly and entirely failed. That is a premise of this war. That's not a book. That's a feature of what's necessary in the way that Medvedev is saying. However, the main peacemaker successfully played, quote, tomahawks, unquote, in his usual manner. He pressured global public opinion and ended the game in the best tradition of sending nuclear submarines. Obviously, Trump didn't send submarines, so this is Medvedev effectively saying Trump's full of shit. Sorry, bro, we don't have enough ourselves. It must be admitted that so far Trump is quite firm in the position, quote, this is not my war. The senile Biden is to blame for everything, unquote. However, even the senile one was against sending long-range missiles to the banderites. Biden threatened it and backed down when Putin told him his response. But this is, of course, not the end of arming Kiev with new weapons, to be continued, and we must be ready for any developments of events. Making the other point, just because they back down now doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be trying to send other weapon systems or even Tomahawk missiles later. It's fascinating. That is fascinating. Look, as I pointed out, when Putin gave his response to Joe Biden threatening to send Tomahawks, Joe Biden had a conniption fit, backed down, and the European leaders that came, Joe Biden effectively was snapping at him because he understood the consequences of sending those missiles. It would mean that the United States was launching missiles directly into Russia. This is a taboo that would have been broken. That would have, you could say that HIMARS and those type of things, okay, fair enough, those things are directional, but Russia's made a very specific point of saying that the Tomahawks is the United States launching those missiles. It doesn't matter if you say they're mercenaries or people, contractors that are effectively launching those missiles. Military people pretending to be contractors will be launching missiles at Russia. Doesn't matter if Russia can knock down a percentage of those missiles. Doesn't matter if Russia can knock down 90% of those missiles. It's the point that the United States has entered the war and is launching and firing those at Russia. Those missiles will not change the context of the war. And so the only thing that you can do, this is kind of the worst of both worlds. This is what I often say about Iran and the nuclear enrichment. It's like, okay, so you don't want nuclear missiles, but you're enriching to like 70, 80%. Okay, just build the missile, dude. If you're going to do it, just build the missile, right? Trump backs off, and apparently they're going to Budapest. We'll see what comes of it. Is the United States willing and capable of accepting a surrender? Meaning they surrender in this case. It is hard for me to believe that a US president would be capable of doing that. By the same token, if that meeting is correct, or Financial Times is reporting that correctly, where Donald Trump is effectively browbeating Zelenskyy into accepting a deal, and Zelenskyy immediately goes to a safe space of European leaders, maybe that means something. I just don't know what it means.